Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%er show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, how Syrian and Iraqi refugee women are finding their voice after creating new lives for themselves and their families in Germany. Also, with more women now breaking records in ultramarathons, have we underestimated the endurance capabilities of women? We'll be talking to Guillaume Millet, a former endurance runner who's been carrying out research on the subject. And Houston, we have a problem. How NASA had to cancel its first ever female spacewalk since it did not have enough spacesuits to fit its women astronauts. But we begin in Germany, which since 2014 has welcomed some 1.4 million refugees, mostly from Iraq and Syria. Yet what has it been like adjusting to life in a mostly secular European country, particularly for the women? Away from their families and the weight of cultural traditions or religion, many are discovering a new kind of freedom, as our team on the ground found out.
We meet Havra somewhere in East Germany. We can't say where for her own safety. But she's 22, rebuilding her life and living with her son alone. She's far from her country, her family, and her violent ex-husband. And she's discovered independence. Just a few years ago, before leaving Iraq, she had to wear a hijab.
This picture was taken in 2014, and I was still in university, taking Islamic studies.
A few months back, Havra had to go to a women's shelter to escape the blows of her husband. Social services gave her this apartment. It's the first time she's ever lived by herself.
To me, freedom means to finally being able to say no. Back in Iraq, and especially the south of the country where I come from, I couldn't say no. This newfound freedom in Germany allows me to live the way I want.
Havra isn't alone. Many refugee women in Germany have found the courage to opt for independence. Mayada Massoud fled Syria in 2012. For 2 years, she lived alone and worked in a restaurant, waiting for her husband. She started making friends and slowly making up her mind. It was time to divorce, something unthinkable back home.
I had no choice but to flee Syria. But the 2 years I spent here in Germany made me much stronger. It was here I realised that I could get by and live alone.
Yahya Alois is a social worker. He advises these women on making use of their newfound rights. He says it's sometimes difficult for the men to accept.
Back home, men are used to doing everything. They work, bring money home. They're in charge of all decisions. Here it's different. They lose control over women, and that disturbs them. Some are quite desperate because they no longer have that control.
There are no official numbers on the trend, but social workers and lawyers say it's happening. A large number of Syrian and Iraqi women are asking for divorce in Germany.
What these women tell us is that they've been thinking about divorce for a while, but it's only since they've come to Germany that it's really become an option. Because here they get the help they need. There's a whole financial support system in place to allow them to live independently.
Havra has created a Facebook page to help these women, to give them advice and encouragement. She has hundreds of followers. Now that she's safe and got her own place, Havra is going to start German lessons. She wants to become a social worker to help women in difficulty.
Today, I've achieved my goal. I'm free. And that allows me to define new goals for the future. I want to study and work.
In the meanwhile, Havra spends all her time on her little boy and enjoying her hard-won freedom.
Now, we've all read or seen those stories, how more and more women are breaking records in ultramarathons, such as Jasmine Paris, who earlier in the year won the Montaigne Spine Race in the UK, a 430-kilometre long event that's longer than 10 marathons It's among the toughest races in the world. So have we seriously underestimated the endurance capabilities of women? Guillaume Millet, a former endurance runner and a university professor here in France, has been studying gender differences in marathons, and he joins me now. Thank you so much for your time, Guillaume. So let me start by asking you, have we significantly underestimated a woman's strength?
I guess so, yes. If you ask me that if I am impressed by what Jasmine did in January, yes, I'm impressed because she beat all men. So that's very impressive. But I am not surprised. I guess most people are, but I'm not surprised that she has been able to finish the race in that time. But I have at least 7 or 8 other names of females that have done the same, like beating all males overall.
What did you actually discover in your research?
We studied the muscle fatigue. So we compare 2 groups of female and males of similar relative level of performance. And what we found is that the muscle fatigue was actually lower in females compared to males. So one explanation for that is that there are intrinsically more fatigue resistance, but the other possibility, and it's impossible to decide which one is the good one, or maybe a combination of both, is that the women are a bit more conservative. In a sense that they push maybe less. That's an option. We cannot rule out this explanation.
So there are psychological factors that kick in as a result.
It is possible. But when you, not in our study, but when you look at the literature, scientific literature, there are other reasons to believe that actually females tend to close the gap between the sex when the distance increases. For instance, they are more able to use fat, which is an advantage in a super long distance. They have a higher percentage of what we call the type 1 muscle fibers, which are the fatigue resistant muscle fibers, and they are also lighter. So because they use more fat and they are lighter, they tend to eat less, and by doing so, they have probably less gastrointestinal distress, and that's also a super important factor in ultramarathons.
Absolutely, and just to point out that Jasmine Paris at the time, 35 years old, and was breastfeeding.
Yeah, I'm actually not impressed by the fact that she spent time and she did that, but it probably means that her body fat was probably quite high by then, and we know that body weight is really a handicap when you run, and that makes her performance even more impressive, I guess.
But we are physically different, aren't we? I mean, men tend to be taller and leaner, thus giving them an edge in many sports.
The question is the gap between sex the same for different events? We can conclude that the females are not less capable than men to run ultramarathon. So which actually asks another question. So why? Maybe this is the next question. I guess maybe the most maybe the most interesting one is why then, if they are as capable as men, why are there so few females at the start? Female participants.
In fact, that's what I was going to ask you. What is stopping women from entering these races, do you think?
I'm an exercise physiologist, and I don't think the answer is in my domain. I believe that psychologists or sociologists should be asked, because I truly believe that this is a social or psychological question.
Just having said that, do you think we should stop gender classification in sports?
No, because as I said, there are so many biological differences that it would be completely unfair for females. Like just talking about endurance performance, females have a lower maximal oxygen uptake because they have less red blood cells. So this is like that. You cannot change that, and they have more body fat. Even like the skinniest females will have a higher percentage body fat, so they are heavier. So it's unfair if we remove the sex categories.
Societies and culture in general needs to rethink the way in which they view women and sport, because I think for a lot of women, they're not encouraged to get out there and participate, are they?
Exactly, and that's why those performances, even if it's pretty rare, it's a very good thing, because it shows to women that it is possible, and females are truly able to do those kind of extreme performances, and it's important. It's a good example, in my opinion.
Guillaume Millet, thank you.
Thank you.
And And finally, what should have been a giant leap forward for womankind failed to lift off. NASA's plans for the first all-female spacewalk fell through because the agency did not have enough spacesuits to fit its women astronauts. Claire Rush has more on the story that has many talking.
As the International Space Station, or ISS, orbits the Earth, astronauts prepare to venture into outer space for a spacewalk. A spacewalk is when an astronaut exits a spacecraft while on a mission. The technical term used is extravehicular activity, the aim to perform maintenance tasks on a spacecraft's exterior. One planned for late March on the ISS was set to mark a milestone as the first all-female spacewalk, with astronauts Christina Koch and Anne McClain. But the historic event was cancelled over a lack of spacesuits. According to NASA, McClain had trained in both medium and large-sized suits. But after a recent spacewalk in a size large, she realized the suit was too big.
Suddenly, they realized that the two women astronauts both needed spacesuits in the same size, in a medium. But there weren't enough on board, so instead of changing suits, which may have delayed the mission, they changed astronauts.
Astronaut Nick Hague is set to replace McClain, a disappointment for those who'd been eagerly awaiting the first all-female spacewalk. Some have criticized NASA for being unprepared and for its communications slip-up. Just days before the cancellation, McClain spoke of the mission's importance.
Well, I certainly do think that representation is important for a lot of people, a lot of kids. If they want to grow up and be astronauts, it's important for a lot of people to look out and see someone that looks like them.
Spacesuits cost millions of euros, and most of the suits made by NASA over the last few decades have been made for men. But Washington hopes this may change. Since the debacle, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence has announced plans for a female astronaut to be a part of the next American mission to the moon within the next 5 years.
And that's it for now. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that's France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.